Full story. Abandoned by family after surgery. Watch Emily overcome betrayal and reclaim her life. Welcome to Silent Wars. In today's video, we follow the emotional journey of Emily as she faces betrayal and abandonment by her family. Watch as she discovers the strength to stand up for herself and reclaim her independence. If you enjoy this full story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Silent Wars for more inspiring content. Emily had always believed that family was the one constant in life, the place where love and support were given freely, without question. That belief, however, was shattered after she underwent major knee surgery. The procedure, an ACL reconstruction from an old sports injury, had been something Emily had prepared for meticulously. She had arranged everything: the surgery, the recovery plan, the time she would need to heal. She had made sure to have her family, her parents, and her brother on board. Everyone promised they would be there for her, that they would help her through the most challenging days of her recovery. But when Emily woke up from anesthesia, everything felt wrong. The sterile smell of the hospital room and the dull pain in her knee quickly gave way to a more unsettling feeling. As the fog of anesthesia cleared, she noticed something that made her stomach drop: the silence. The usual hum of life upstairs, the sounds of the television, the footsteps of her parents, and the occasional chatter of her brother was absent. The house, which had always been full of the normal buzz of activity, was eerily still. Emily's leg throbbed, and the realization hit her like a ton of bricks she was completely alone. She thought perhaps they were just being quiet for her, maybe giving her space to rest. But when she finally mustered the strength to call out, her voice echoed in the empty house. Her family was gone. The panic crept up her spine. She checked her phone, hoping for a message, but there was nothing. No one had reached out to check on her, even though she had clearly expressed the need for help after her surgery. She dragged herself up the stairs, using her crutches, and went into the kitchen. The house was not just quiet, it was completely empty. The cars were gone. No one had left a note or any indication of where they had gone. Then, she saw it. On Instagram, her sister-in-law had posted a picture from a snowy cabin captioned, "Needed this getaway." Emily's heart sank as she realized that while she lay in pain, struggling to even move, her family had decided to leave her behind for a vacation. They hadn't even bothered to inform her, let alone help her as promised. How could they leave me like this? The thought echoed in her mind, over and over again. The betrayal was suffocating. The pain in her knee seemed almost secondary now, as the emotional weight of the abandonment pressed down on her chest. Emily had gone out of her way to prepare, to make sure everyone knew her situation. She had coordinated everything, expected help, and yet, in her greatest moment of need, her family had turned their backs. She wasn't just being ignored, she had been deliberately abandoned, left to fend for herself without a second thought. The house was still silent, and for the first time in her life, Emily truly felt alone. At 32 years old, Emily had always been the one her family relied on, the dependable one, the fixer, the quiet supporter. She had a decent job in IT and paid her own rent for the basement unit in her parents' house. Although it was technically their property, Emily had set up her own life there. She managed her bills, took care of herself, and rarely asked for help. She was the one who handled things when something broke, the one who fixed the Wi-Fi when it malfunctioned, or spent hours troubleshooting tech problems for her parents. It had always been like this: Emily quietly solving problems, making things run smoothly without complaint. It was expected of her. But this time was different. After her surgery, Emily had been transparent. She told her family exactly what she needed: help with meals, maybe a ride to a follow-up appointment, assistance with daily tasks while she recovered. She had made it clear that she was relying on them, even if it was just for the first few difficult days. But now, As the days passed with no word from anyone, it became painfully clear that her family didn't seem to care. The emptiness of the house was louder than any words could have been. No one checked in. No one asked how she was doing or if she needed help. It felt like a cruel joke she had always been the one to show up for them. Yet when she needed them the most, they were nowhere to be found. As Emily struggled through the pain in her knee, the physical discomfort seemed almost secondary to the emotional ache of feeling invisible. The crutches clattered on the cold basement floor, a sharp reminder of her vulnerability, and the weight of her family's indifference hit her harder than the pain radiating from her leg. She had always been the go-to person fixing things, making sure everything was running smoothly, and doing it without expecting anything in return. Her family had never seemed to appreciate the sacrifices she made. When her brother needed help with his tech, she was the one who set things up. When the garage door broke, Emily spent hours on a Saturday afternoon fixing it, without a word of thanks from anyone. She even mowed the lawn for her dad, took care of grocery runs, and covered for her mom when things got tight financially. She did these things because they needed to be done, and she never complained. It was just who she was, always the one who kept things moving behind the scenes. But now, in her time of need, she felt like an afterthought. The emotional toll was worse than any physical pain. It was as if her role in the family was only to serve, to be the helper, the fixer, the one who made things work for everyone else. And yet, when it came time for her to ask for help, they were nowhere to be found. The reality of her situation was sinking in. Emily had been playing her part in a family where she was expected to disappear into the background, always available, but never really seen. The hurt, though, was not just about being ignored. It was about the deep realization that her family didn't even notice her absence, didn't seem to care. It stung more than any physical injury. The agony of being invisible was something she had never experienced so acutely before, and it left her questioning everything. What did it all mean if, in the end, her family didn't even care enough to be there when she needed them most? By noon, on the second day after her surgery, Emily had gathered every ounce of strength to pull herself up the stairs to the main kitchen. Each step was a challenge, with her crutches barely supporting her weakened body, but she pushed through, determined to get some food and ease the pain that throbbed in her knee. But when she reached the kitchen, she was hit with a wave of disappointment. The house was empty. The silence was deafening. The fridge, once full of leftovers and groceries, was now almost bare, with only a few old containers of food and some condiments left behind. There was no evidence that anyone had even thought about preparing meals for her, as they had promised. Her stomach churned, not from hunger, but from the crushing realization that her family was nowhere to be found. She had trusted them. They had promised to be there, to help her through this recovery. But now, just hours after her surgery, they had disappeared without a trace. Her crutches clacked against the kitchen floor as she slowly grabbed a yogurt and an apple from the fridge, struggling to balance the items while making her way back to the basement. The tears she had been holding back suddenly stung her eyes. How could they leave me like this? She had been clear about needing help, yet no one seemed to care. Emily had sent a text earlier in the morning, asking for something as simple as a few more ice packs from the garage freezer. It was a small request, one she thought would be easily accommodated, but there had been no reply, no call, no message, just silence. The lack of response felt like a slap in the face, a reminder that her family had simply moved on, as if she didn't exist. She had been there for them countless times, whether it was fixing the Wi-Fi, troubleshooting a computer problem, or running errands when things got tough. But now, when she needed them the most, they were nowhere to be found. As she collapsed back into her basement unit, Emily opened her phone, hoping for some sign that her family was at least checking in on her. But what she saw next was worse than she could have imagined. Her sister-in-law had posted a video on Instagram, a cozy scene of her family gathered around a fireplace in a cabin, smiling and laughing. The caption read, "Needed this getaway." The words felt like a punch to the gut. They were on vacation at that very moment, while she was struggling alone in pain. The feeling of abandonment hit her like a tidal wave, and for a moment, Emily couldn't breathe. The world felt like it was crashing around her. She couldn't believe it. How could they leave her behind like this? The hurt ran deep, and the tears she had been holding back finally spilled over. It wasn't just the physical pain of her knee, it was the emotional weight of being abandoned by the people she had always relied on. Emily had done everything for them, and yet, in her time of need, she was left to fend for herself. Her family's thoughtlessness was the real injury, one that no amount of physical recovery could heal. It wasn't until much later, when Emily's phone buzzed with a message from her brother, that the full weight of what had happened truly sank in. She had spent the past few days trying to make sense of her family's disappearance, all the while battling both physical pain and an overwhelming sense of abandonment. When she saw the text, she thought maybe someone was finally reaching out to check on her. But instead, the message shattered her fragile hope. "Stop making everything about yourself." Her brother's words flashed across the screen. "We needed a break, and you're guilt-tripping us over a little vacation." Emily's breath caught in her throat. His tone was sharp, dismissive. There was no apology, no inquiry about how she was doing after her surgery, no concern for her recovery. It wasn't a message of empathy or understanding. It was an accusation, a harsh reminder that her family had chosen their own needs over hers. A little vacation? She thought bitterly. Her heart sank as the reality of it all hit her like a ton of bricks. The moment of truth had arrived. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some unintentional oversight. Her family had made a deliberate choice to leave her alone, in pain, and isolated, knowing full well that she was recovering from major surgery. They had left her behind without a second thought, without so much as a glance in her direction, and now they were accusing her of guilt-tripping them? The audacity was staggering. As she sat there in the cold silence of her basement unit, Emily felt more alone than she ever had before. The house that had once been a place of comfort and refuge now felt like a prison. It was a place where she had spent so many years giving, doing, and helping, always in the background, always invisible. She had been the one who quietly fixed the problems, who made sure everything worked, who kept the peace. And yet, in her time of need, when she had reached out for help, they had turned their backs on her. The weight of it was too much to bear. The family she had always supported, no. The family she had always lived for had chosen to leave her unacknowledged, unsupported, and in unbearable pain. Her body hurt, but the betrayal stung deeper. How could they do this to her? How could they just leave without even checking in, knowing how much she needed them? For the first time in her life, Emily felt like nothing more than an afterthought, a problem to be solved only when it was convenient for them. The harsh reality of their actions forced her to confront a painful truth. Her family's love and support had always been conditional, and she had been the one who paid the price for that. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond. There was nothing left to say that could change what had already been done. She stared at her phone for a long time, her thoughts swirling, until finally, she put it down. It was clear now nothing was ever going to be the same again. As the hours passed, Emily's frustration grew, mixing with a deep, gnawing sadness. Her knee was swollen and throbbing, each movement an excruciating reminder of the surgery she had just undergone. But the physical pain, as overwhelming as it was, paled in comparison to the emotional anguish of feeling invisible. She had spent her whole life quietly taking on the burdens of others, fixing things, handling problems, and offering support without a second thought. Yet, in the one moment when she needed help, when her vulnerability was at its peak, her family had abandoned her. It was a betrayal she hadn't seen coming, and the more she thought about it, the more the weight of their indifference suffocated her. Enough is enough, she thought bitterly. She had given them everything: her time, her energy, and her patience, and now, in her time of need, they couldn't even bother to check in. It was a harsh realization. She had been nothing more than an unpaid, unnoticed caretaker in her own family, always expected to do everything without question or reward. But not anymore. Something inside her shifted. She wasn't going to let them get away with this, not in the way they thought. But instead of acting out in anger, Emily chose to reclaim her power in the quietest, most definitive way possible. In a quiet act of defiance, she started making changes: small, subtle changes that no one would notice at first, but ones that would slowly begin to dismantle the role she had been playing for years. Emily logged into all the accounts she had been managing for the family: the Netflix account they all used, the Spotify family plan, the household utilities she had always taken care of. She had paid the bills, set up subscriptions, and even managed their shared Google Calendar. One by one, she started disengaging from them all. She removed her credit card information, canceled the subscriptions, and wiped her access from the family calendar. She felt a strange but empowering surge of control as she clicked through each action, the weight of her family's expectations lifting off her shoulders with every step. They had always relied on her, thinking she would just be there, handling everything for them without complaint. But now, as Emily sat there, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, she realized something important. They want independence from my perceived neediness? Fine. Let them handle things on their own for once. The silence that had once felt suffocating now felt liberating. She wasn't bound by their expectations anymore. Emily was finally reclaiming her autonomy. In that moment, she realized that she didn't need to be the one holding everything together. She didn't need to be the silent fixer or the invisible support system anymore. The power was hers. And with each account she disconnected from, each obligation she removed herself from, Emily was taking back the life that had been slowly eroded by her family's neglect. She wasn't just healing physically, she was healing emotionally, and it felt more freeing than she had ever imagined. The rebellion wasn't loud or obvious, but it was a rebellion nonetheless. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was finally living for herself. It had been nearly a week since Emily's family had returned from their surprise vacation, and yet, no one had checked in on her. No knock on her door, no call to ask how she was recovering. She could hear the sounds of movement upstairs: footsteps, the opening and closing of doors, but there was no sign of concern or care directed towards her. It was as if her existence had been completely forgotten. The house, once a place she considered her sanctuary, had become a reminder of everything she had quietly sacrificed for the sake of her family. The trash had started to pile up by her door, something Emily had always taken care of. The lawn outside, which she used to mow every few weeks, had grown unkempt, and the unpaid bills that she used to manage were starting to stack up on the kitchen counter. She had always been the one to take care of the small details, the things that kept their household running smoothly, but now it was clear no one else had stepped up. They had taken her contributions for granted, and now that she was in need, they couldn't even offer a simple gesture of kindness. The final blow came the following morning. Emily's phone buzzed, breaking the silence that had weighed on her for days. It was a text from her brother. He was complaining about the Wi-Fi being down. "Did you break the Wi-Fi?" he demanded, as if she were still the one responsible for fixing everything. Emily's heart sank. She had always been the go-to person for problems like this, the one who was expected to resolve any issue that arose. But not today. Not anymore. Emily didn't respond. She didn't have the energy to argue or explain. Instead, she quietly deleted the message, almost as if deleting the reminder of her brother's entitlement would somehow erase the hurt he had caused her. It wasn't just about the Wi-Fi, it was about the unspoken assumption that she would always be there, silently shouldering the weight of the household's responsibilities without any recognition or gratitude. But she was done. Later, she received a voicemail from her mom, asking her to fix the thermostat which had malfunctioned. The tone was casual, almost like an afterthought. "Can you take a look when you get a chance? It's kind of chilly up here," her mom had said, as if Emily had nothing else on her plate, no pain to manage, no emotional turmoil to navigate. It was the same tone Emily had heard countless times before, the tone of someone who thought their needs were more important than anyone else's. But Emily had had enough. The emotional weight of everything, the abandonment, the neglect, the constant giving without ever receiving, had reached its breaking point. She had been left to suffer for days without a word from anyone. Now it was her turn. She no longer owed them anything. The realization was liberating. She had been giving, sacrificing, and carrying the load for so long, but now it was time to stop. Emily wasn't going to sacrifice herself any longer, not for their convenience, not for their comfort. She had done enough. And now, she was going to start living for herself. Later that evening, as Emily tried to unwind in the silence of her basement unit, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps on the stairs. Her heart sank, knowing who it was before the door even opened. It was her mother. She stepped in without hesitation, her face flushed with urgency, as if there was something dire that needed immediate attention. But Emily wasn't prepared for what came next, without so much as a, "How are you feeling?" or "How's your recovery going?" Her mother rushed into the room, her tone clipped and demanding. "Emily, the thermostat's broken again, and the Wi-Fi isn't working. Can you please take care of it?" she asked, her words not laced with concern, but with the same casual expectation Emily had grown so accustomed to. Emily's jaw clenched, and for a moment she considered ignoring the request. She was tired, exhausted from everything, the surgery, the pain, the emotional toll. But more than that, she was tired of always being the one to fix everything. She had been a caretaker for her family for so long, putting their needs above her own, and now, after everything that had happened, she had reached a breaking point. "I'm not taking care of these things anymore," Emily said, her voice calm but firm. The words were quiet, but they rang in the air between them like a declaration of independence. It was the first time in years that she had spoken her mind so clearly, without hesitation or guilt. Her mother didn't miss a beat, her response predictable and defensive. "You're overreacting," she said, as if Emily's refusal to cater to their demands was some sort of emotional tantrum. "It's not a big deal. We were just trying to have a nice time," she added, as though her family's sudden departure on vacation while Emily was struggling to recover was something she could brush off so easily. Emily's frustration boiled over, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to snap. The tears that had been building up, the anger she had been holding in for so long, all surged to the surface. She stood up, her voice steady but full of raw emotion. "You know what? I asked for help before the surgery, repeatedly. I told all of you that I needed support, and not once did anyone bother to check in on me. I've been here, doing everything for this family, and now I'm just supposed to drop everything and fix your problems?" Her mother, still lost in her own justifications, opened her mouth to speak, but Emily wasn't done. "I needed you when I was in pain. I needed you when I couldn't even move. But you went off to have a nice time. You left me alone. And now you want me to fix everything?" Emily shook her head, her heart pounding. "I'm done being the one who always sacrifices. I'm done." Her mother stood there, blinking, as if she couldn't quite process the gravity of what Emily had said. Without another word, she turned and walked out, still clinging to her own justification. Emily watched her go, the silence that followed feeling both heavy and empowering. She had spoken her truth, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. As the door clicked shut behind her mother, Emily sat back down, staring at the empty space in front of her. It wasn't the resolution she had hoped for, but it was a turning point. She wasn't going to let them keep walking all over her anymore. The road to reclaiming her own life had just begun. It wasn't long after Emily's encounter with her mother that the storm of emotions she had been holding inside finally broke. The house was quiet, but the tension hung thick in the air. Then, as if summoned by the silence, her brother stormed into the basement. His face was twisted in frustration, his eyes sharp with anger. Without even a "hello," he demanded to know why everything was falling apart in the house. "Why is the Wi-Fi down? Why is the thermostat broken? Why didn't the trash get taken out?" He raged, his voice rising with each question. To anyone else, these might have seemed like reasonable complaints, but to Emily, they were the final straw. She had given, and given, always there to fix things, to handle the problems, to take care of the family's needs. But when it came time for them to return the favor, they had disappeared. Now, her brother was angry because things weren't running smoothly, and he was pointing the finger at her. Her patience had worn thin, and with a surge of emotion, Emily snapped. The words came rushing out louder and sharper than she intended. "When was the last time you cared about me or my needs unless something was broken or a bill needed paying?" she shouted, her voice raw with years of unspoken frustration. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, her brother froze. But that moment quickly passed, and the argument escalated into a heated exchange of accusations. He accused her of deliberately sabotaging things, of withholding her help just to get back at them. Emily's blood boiled, but she didn't flinch. She had already been pushed too far. She was done being the scapegoat, the invisible one who kept everything together while no one saw or cared for her. "You don't get to treat me like this anymore," she said, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "I'm done being the one who fixes everything while no one acknowledges my existence." The silence that followed her words was deafening, but it wasn't empty. There was weight in it, weight that had been building for years, a weight that was finally lifted with her declaration. For the first time, Emily wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. She wasn't going to be the one to bear the burden anymore. She wasn't going to be the one who always gave, always sacrificed, and always erased her own needs for the sake of the family. Her brother's face turned a deeper shade of red, his anger intensifying. But there was nothing he could say to make her feel guilty. He opened his mouth to argue, but Emily was done listening. Without another word, she turned and walked away. As she walked back to her basement unit, she heard the door slam behind her. In that moment, Emily knew the dynamic in the house had shifted. She had drawn a line in the sand. The weight of the household, the silent responsibility, would no longer fall on her shoulders alone. For the first time in a long time, Emily was going to prioritize herself. And whatever happened next, she knew she had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life, her autonomy, and her peace. The final realization came slowly but hit harder than anything Emily had experienced before. She had spent years in her family's house, dutifully playing the role of the fixer, the caretaker, and the one who always stepped up to handle the responsibilities that no one else wanted. She had given so much of herself to them, but it became painfully clear that her efforts had been taken for granted. As the weeks went by, Emily couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Her family didn't appreciate her, they didn't value her, and they certainly didn't respect her needs. The weight of their disregard, coupled with the emotional and physical toll of the past few weeks, pushed her to a breaking point. The straw that broke the camel's back came when Emily realized she had nothing left to give. She wasn't just emotionally drained, she was depleted, hollowed out by the years of silent sacrifice. The final conversation with her brother had been the catalyst she needed to see things clearly. They didn't care about her recovery, her health, or even her happiness. They only cared about their convenience, their comfort, and their needs. Emily had been a safety net for them, but in return, they had offered nothing but neglect and judgment. Enough was enough. With a sense of quiet determination, Emily made the decision to leave. She couldn't stay in a place where she was invisible, where her presence was only acknowledged when something needed to be fixed or paid for. She contacted a close friend who lived a few hours away and asked for help. It was difficult, not just physically, but emotionally. Leaving the house, the home she had shared with her family for years, felt like walking away from everything she knew. But Emily knew that this was the only way forward. The day she moved out, she didn't look back. As her belongings were packed into her friend's car, Emily left behind more than just a physical space. She left behind the pain, the suffocating expectations, and the toxic cycle of giving without receiving. The house that had once been her home was now a place that held only memories of neglect and betrayal. She was done being the one to make it all work. She was done being invisible. Emily moved into a small, modest apartment, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a sense of control. The apartment wasn't much, but it was hers. She could make the decisions, create her own routines, and most importantly, she could live on her own terms. The freedom she felt was more fulfilling than any family support she had ever received. It was a freedom born of self-respect, of standing up for herself when no one else had. Emily had fought for her independence, and now she was living it. The pain of the past few weeks, the sense of abandonment, and the weight of her family's expectations were behind her. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was finally starting to breathe again. She had taken the first step toward reclaiming her life, and nothing would hold her back. The story of Emily's journey teaches us a powerful lesson about self-worth, boundaries, and the importance of prioritizing our own well-being. For years, Emily quietly gave of herself, supporting her family without expecting anything in return. However, her turning point came when she realized that, despite her sacrifices, her family didn't value her needs. This stark realization pushed her to make a difficult but necessary decision: to stop giving when she wasn't being appreciated, and to take control of her own life. For many of us, especially as we age, it can be easy to fall into the trap of self-sacrifice, feeling obligated to care for others without taking time to care for ourselves. But Emily's story reminds us that self-respect and personal boundaries are just as important as helping others. It's never too late to reclaim your autonomy and seek the peace and freedom that comes from living life on your own terms. Being kind to ourselves, saying no when necessary, and setting healthy boundaries are vital practices for maintaining emotional and physical well-being, especially as we age. Life is about balance, and it's important to nurture your own needs as much as you nurture the needs of others. You deserve care, respect, and love, starting with yourself. Thank you for watching. We hope Emily's story has inspired you to take control of your own journey and prioritize your happiness. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Silent Wars for more powerful stories and content. Your support helps us bring more meaningful videos to you.